Trubisky has a contract extension. Kelo Witherspoon has been released, and there's still no word about that final roster spot. Let's start with Kelo Witherspoon here. Cut from the Steelers, saves them roughly $4 million. He was set to make a little over $5 million this season. Dealt with a hamstring injury last year, obviously, so he only played 3 games. Kind of a rough road for his time in Pittsburgh. A guy that last year at this time we were talking about, is he the guy? Like, do the Steelers view him as the next franchise cornerback of this team? He's gone, saved some space. You know, you look at the move, it obviously makes sense financially, but what were your thoughts when it happened?
Yeah, I mean, not overly surprising, right? I mean, it was going to be difficult for him to crack the 53-man roster just with the Steelers drafting, Joey Porter Jr., 32nd overall, and then, double dipping and getting Cory Trice as well. Along with, the other guys set on the roster. They brought in Patrick Peterson. I think him and Levi Wallace are probably the go-to favorites right now to start on the outside. You're not drafting Joey Porter Jr. at 32 to sit. And then, just looking at the cap hit, right? Like, a cap hit of $5-6 million, you're not going to pay a fourth cornerback that. I mean, you just, from a roster building or roster construction standpoint, that makes zero sense to do. Yeah. So he was going to be fighting an uphill battle. I actually think it's good for Kelo, probably right now, to go ahead and get his release, and he can pursue other opportunities before training camp. And also, I think it's a good move for the Steelers because, you don't want, and not, this is going to sound like kind of mean, but like, you don't want him get hurt in like OTAs to where you actually have to pay him.
Yes.
Like on injured reserve, or you have to keep him when, there was really a very slim path for him making this team. So
yeah. It wasn't overly surprising. The writing was on the wall, just like you said. I think now the question is, like, who's that fourth? Is it James Pierre? Does it go? Is it Cory Trice Jr.? Does Chandon Sullivan and Duke Dawson like, what's the cornerback outlook? Obviously, Patrick Peterson, Joey Porter Jr., and Levi Wallace are kind of locks to make the team. They usually keep 5. Who do you see being those other 2?
Yeah, I mean, one more thing that I want to talk about with Kelo is, like, when they signed Kelo and Levi Wallace to the same exact contract last year, I think I remember coming on this show and I was like, one of them's not going to be here next year. I mean, just because of the way it was structured.
We saw it the other way around.
Yeah, the 2-year deals, like the year 1 cap hits are always smaller, and then they spread the signing bonus out. The year 2 cap hits a little bit higher, and they just weren't going to pay like 2 corners of that caliber like $5-6 million. Not that that's an outrageous amount. It's just you're not going to do it. So especially when we knew they draft a corner eventually again. So as far as who's going to be CB4, man, I think I think it's going to be between Pierre and Cory Trice if I had to guess for that outside spot. Of course, I mean, I'm saying CB4 on the outside because somebody
because the nickel's down. Like a whole other spot.
Yeah. I mean, does Peterson factor in the nickel? That could also that could also change the responsibilities in the secondary as well. But Cory Trice has a really good. I mean, rarely do I say this about 7th-round picks, but he has a really good chance to make the roster, not just because of how uniquely talented I think he is, but also because, there is an opening. I feel like behind those first 3 guys, I do feel like that there's a good chance for him to make the team potentially. So, but James Pierre, I mean, he played really well last year in the very limited time that we saw him. He had a good game against Tampa when he was called upon, when his number was called upon, and then his special teams value, like, that can't be completely discounted there either. If you're not going to be one of the top 2 or 3 guys at your position, you better be able to play special teams. And James Pierre has proven over the course of, his time with the Steelers that he can be a solid special teams contributor for Danny Smith. So I think that's going to work in his favor. It's going to be a good camp battle. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, the CB4 spot is going to be a good one. I remember talking to Danny Smith last year at camp, or maybe it was, it had to be last year because Justin Lane's time in Pittsburgh ended last 53-man roster, correct? I believe. Yes.
I'm almost positive. Camp. Yeah, I think. Well, maybe he was. I don't know.
No, he was because
he was in camp. Yeah, he was in camp.
Yeah, because I remember talking to him about his latest album release or something. Yep. A true story. But I remember talking to Danny Smith, and he straight up said, he was like, I told James at the beginning of the summer, the way you're going to make this roster is you have to be a better special teamer than Justin Lane, which at the time Justin Lane was I
Yeah,
mean,
he was a gunner for them for
he was
several
a
years.
gunner, and they loved how good he was at special teams. He was terrible at corner, but he's a great special teamer. So James Pierre being able to beat him out gives me a lot of confidence there. I still think Trice has an opportunity. Like, I think if the Steelers kind of competed out and it falls into how I believe it's going to fall into, Patrick Peterson, Joey Porter Jr., and Levi Wallace are going to be the guys that you're like, okay, these are destined. James Pierre is a given after he fought his way in. And then I think they're going to look at Cory Trice Jr. They're going to look at Chandon Sullivan and say, we have a decision to make here. Are we going to take a risk and lose Cory Trice by waiving him and putting him on the practice squad? Or are we going to get rid of Chandon Sullivan and just figure that out as we move forward? I think that's like a real possibility. I think like guys like Trey Norwood maybe, and I don't believe it that Trey Norwood's going to get an opportunity there, but I think if it works out to where the Steelers have to come up with other options, he's a name. Patrick Peterson's a name. Maybe DeMonte KZ's a name. I just think that if it comes down to it, they're not going to get rid of Trice to take a shot on somebody that's going to be here for a year.
Yeah, I would be really disappointed if it came to it. Like if Trice doesn't make this team, I'm going to be bummed just because I think that he's so talented. I think the film is not a 7th rounder cornerback film. No. Man. It's just not. You just don't find guys that are that big, that athletic with that kind of coverage profile in the 7th round very often. That's why I wanted them to double dip, and they did. So I'm happy about that. He's not a lock to make the roster though, man. Like draft capital, I know like people will kind of give a little pushback on this on Twitter, but draft capital matters to people making the team. It matters for the opportunities that you get. It matters to the coaching staff. It matters to, the head coaches. Like it's a league wide thing. Like talented players, they just don't get as many shots if you don't get drafted high. It just matters more. You get more chances if you're selected earlier. So, but I think Trice has a good chance to make the roster. I mean, I do think that one slot specialist, we'll just say like slot only guy, is going to make the roster. Now, is that Chandon Sullivan? Yeah, could potentially be. Duke Dawson, like could he factor in that spot? Yeah. And then I do think that they're going to have to find another way as far as like a backup role or a secondary guy to kind of supplement whoever they choose as their slot corner, whether that's Patrick Peterson moving into the slot, whether that's DeMonte KZ coming down to the slot. That's probably how it's going to play out. And the Steelers could also keep 6 corners. Like, I don't think there's anything that's necessarily going to prevent them from doing that. It's just they haven't done it as much, I don't think, on the opening roster. Of course, the end of the roster is so fluid, like come week 1 or preseason. Yeah. But I also just think that like there's a chance they could keep 6 corners. They just might not have in recent years because like the Steelers haven't even been drafting corners in the past couple of years. So it's like, what are you keeping that 6th guy for? Like you're just not needing to do it. But one more thing on Trice, back in 2019, he covered kicks, and that could be a little bit of a good thing. Yeah. He covered 40 kicks in 2019 for Purdue, had 2 special teams tackles, but that's the last time he's really played special teams. I mean, he doesn't have any, punt cover reps in college. So this is just a transition. Like when you get these guys who were, if they're going to the NFL, like a lot of times they're the best, or if not one of the best players on their team. And those guys typically don't get the chance to play a lot of special teams in college. It's just how it is. So these guys are really going to be learning this aspect of football really for the first time, and that's going to be interesting to see kind of how that plays out.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the learning curve of the NFL. Just like you said, these guys are way too good to be on special teams in college. So you have to come in here. But guys figure it out quickly. Hopefully Trice is one of those guys. He's probably already gotten the speech a dozen times. You win Danny Smith over, you're going to make this team. That's how you're going to do it.